Coming up, it's a big night for SEC recruiting as 4 prospects from the same high school could announce SEC college homes. We'll talk about it all next right here on SEC Country Live. Hello everyone, my name is Brandon Adams and this is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. We're glad to have you with us for SEC Country Live. Over the course of the next 60 minutes, we'll talk plenty of SEC with you. A lot of that includes your comments in the comment section. We'll deal with some recruiting stuff as later on this evening live here on these SEC Country video channels. However you're watching this show right now, you can see us later on as we announce the Grayson 4 and their college decisions. A lot of SEC schools involved in the mix. We'll have more on that, but plenty else to talk about today in addition to recruiting.
I can't remember. I mean, you go back with the recruiting farther than that. I can't remember one announcement where there's 4 guys on stage and there's so many SEC schools involved. Man, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, they're all kind of got a chance to get somebody tonight.
Let's, in fact, start right there. Item number 1 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We have different, factions in our audience. Some people who watch our show every day who are very plugged into recruiting. Others maybe a little bit more mainstream, maybe only pay attention on National Signing Day, or maybe even only pay attention during the fall when these kids start actually playing in some games. But for those who do follow recruiting, you may have no doubt heard about the Grayson 4. Grayson High School is a high school in suburban Atlanta. Now, some Georgians always sort of get on to me when I say that Grayson's suburban Atlanta, but it is essentially Gwinnett.
Is that Loganville?
It's in Gwinnett County, which is an Atlanta suburb.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is essentially suburban Atlanta, but nonetheless, tonight from Grayson High School, or I should say from a sports bar in Atlanta, 4 Grayson players. Grayson, one of the powers in all of college high school football, nationally speaking. Elite talent each and every year coming out of that high school. 4 of them will make their college announcement tonight. We're going to cover it for you live here on the SEC Country Facebook, SEC Country YouTube, SEC Country Twitter video channels starting at 5:30 p.m. And, for a lot of these guys, there are SEC schools where they're likely to land. Kenyatta Watson, the safety, is the one who's almost for sure not going to an SEC school. It seems like he's either probably down to Texas, maybe Notre Dame. Looking like he's probably going to pick Texas here. But for the other guys in this list, there's at least a 100% chance, or in maybe one case, a 50% chance that it's an SEC name that gets called. Let me deal with a couple of these guys first, because I think that these recruits in general have storylines that actually feature into some of the other stuff we've talked about here on SEC Country Live a lot over the past couple of weeks, including the 4-star offensive lineman Wanya Morris, who's going to choose tonight between Tennessee and Auburn. As we've talked about before here on SEC Country Live, Morris has been conflicted. Seems like he may be leaning towards Tennessee here at the 11th hour. That'd be a huge win for Jeremy Pruitt if it indeed is that announcement from Wanya Morris. He needs a 4-star prospect of some variety from some state at some time here. Pruitt could really use a big recruiting win. Maybe tonight he gets one.
Yeah, I think this is a bigger haul for Tennessee than it would be loss for Auburn. Does that make sense?
I understand.
When you look at the 247 page, it's like 94% headed to Tennessee, and I think that he's one of those guys that's probably already told the coaches where he's going to go. But for Jeremy Pruitt, I think this, and we mentioned this before, can he open that pipeline down into Georgia? Can he start dipping into the Atlanta area, and suburb or not, start getting some of these players? Because the depth is just not there in the state of Tennessee like it is in Georgia right now. Georgia has become such a recruiting hub for all these national programs. Jeremy Pruitt has got to start that somewhere, and if that starts tonight with Wanya Morris, I think it is a huge deal for that program.
I agree with you. I think this will be a monster win for Jeremy Pruitt for all the reasons you just mentioned. It is worth pointing out, though, that this particular position, offensive line, is one in which we've seen Auburn chase after a lot of guys here this offseason, ultimately landing on Jack Driscoll, the graduate transfer offensive lineman from UMass. But you had the graduate transfer from Rice not too long ago that was a heavy competition for Auburn here. So Auburn has been looking for some late help with its offensive line. So we're to lose out on Wanya Morris. I agree with you that it's more of a Tennessee win than it would be an Auburn loss. But this is a pretty pivotal position for Auburn here, too.
It definitely is. When you look at Wanya Morris, and this is all apologies to Kevin Harris and Oa Popo, when you look at Wanya Morris, he almost looks more game ready. I mean, those other guys, they have the frame. They'll add some weight, coming in this senior year, and when they get to college, they'll add some to your frame. But, Harris sitting there at 218, Popo at 209. When you look at Wanya Morris, he's 6'6", 293. Like, this is a guy who's going to be ready to go sooner than later when you look at his talent level and playing at a place like Grayson. You wonder if he doesn't become a factor almost immediately when he steps on campus for Tennessee, because they have been thin at the offensive line position in terms of recruiting. he's going to be one of the best one as soon as he get there if he does head to Knoxville.
That's if he chooses Tennessee. Of course, one of the things going for Auburn here in the Wanya Morris recruitment is the fact that one of his high school teammates from Grayson, Ja'Kai Clark, who's a 3-star center, recently committed to Auburn. That's the kind of talent Grayson High School in the state of Georgia deals with almost every single year. A lot of SEC schools, a lot of schools around the South have players from Grayson in the program. The fact that an offensive lineman from Grayson's already committed to Auburn could be one of the things that helps Wanya Morris maybe move in the direction of the Tigers, but it does seem like some of the online chatter as of late has Morris landing at Tennessee. Let's talk for a moment about linebacker Kevin Harris here, who has been in the mix for LSU, has been in the mix for Alabama. At one point in time, a few months ago, was thought to be a Georgia lean. Georgia not really in the picture here on this tonight. Miami has come on strong as of late. It seems like a lot of the online talk has it Alabama versus Miami here in the final 2 spots for Kevin Harris, and it sounds like a pretty intense battle for a player it looks like the Crimson Tide really wants.
Yeah, they really covet Kevin Harris. When you look at his skill set, he's kind of a Tim Anderson type of guy for Alabama's football team. Kind of that tweener, rush in, drop in kind of linebacker role that they really love in Nick Saban's defense. Like I said, he's a guy that needs to fill out a little bit. I think he's weighing in at 219 right now, but very quick off the edge, very good with his hands when you watch his film, and I think that's why Nick Saban covets this guy so much. Kind of already a full repertoire in terms of rushing the edge. Doesn't need to really be developed, just needs to add a little weight. I think it's been interesting to watch this recruiting battle. Miami really selling him on the academics that you'll get at a private school down at Miami. Alabama selling him on more of the football side of things.
You made a comparison with Alabama players of the past. How do you compare him to a guy like, say, Rashaan Evans, who we just saw move on in the NFL? How does a guy like Harris compare to Rashaan Evans in your mind?
I think favorably the rush side of Rashaan Evans. Now, you saw Rashaan Evans back off the ball a little more than you're going to see them ask Harris to do. He's going to be a little bit more of a rush. And it's like I said, he's one of those guys that already has the nice hands and the lean and the bend that you really like to get around the edge. And I know Nick Saban covets him in that kind of jack hybrid linebacker role.
And then we get to the big prize of the night. The 1 5-star name will announce his decision later on this evening from Atlanta. We'll have live coverage here on the SEC Country Video channels. And it's the 5-star linebacker Owen Pappoe. And this is quite a story here in terms of the twists and turns that it's taken as of late. When Dog Nation caught up with Pappoe at the Charlotte Nike opening regional qualifier a few weeks ago, Pappoe admitted that Georgia has been his favorite here for a while, but there is another school that has sort of stepped in to become a major contender. Here is Pappoe from a couple of weeks ago.
I've said Georgia's my top school. They are. People say Auburn's coming in the picture. I mean, I guess so.
He says people say Auburn is coming in the picture. I guess so. There is some thought that Auburn is, and frankly it's more than some thought, it's overwhelming thought at the moment, that Auburn has done more than come in the picture. That Auburn, using Travis Williams, the linebacker coach, has actually overtaken Georgia for the lead for Pappoe tonight. And in the city of Atlanta, in the state of Georgia, Pappoe will announce tonight, at least for now, that he's planning on leaving the state of Georgia for his college home of Auburn. What's your reaction to that?
I think it's a huge deal, and I think it's a huge deal for Auburn, and it goes along the lines of what I was saying about Tennessee earlier. This is a bigger get for Auburn than it is a loss for Georgia. Remember, Auburn went the entire cycle last year without a 5-star player.
16 4-star guys,
16
no
4-stars, no 5-star players. And so you go all the way back to what Calvin Ashley, maybe the year before, since you've gotten a 5-star commitment out of a guy before, while he's got that 5th star. And I think that's a big deal for Auburn and Gus Malzahn to really put the cap on this. You saw the commitment earlier this weekend from Jalen Simpson. That moves them from 32nd to 25th class in the country. You can bet that if Pappoe signs in the dotted line, all of a sudden Auburn and Gus Malzahn start inching back to that point they want to be, trying to get back in that top 10 of classes.
We'll have more on Simpson later on the show, including how he may factor into one of his Fort Frederica high school teammates, Jashawn Sheffield, another 4-star athlete. So a lot at stake here for Auburn over the course of the next couple of days. But in terms of the Auburn battle with Georgia, what was the Georgia coach's response when Pappoe talked to them about the onslaught of attention that seems like Pappoe has given Auburn here? Here's a very, I guess, honest response from Pappoe on that subject.
Yeah, they like, what's all this talk about Auburn? I'm like, Coach, just let the media be the media. I just told him, if you don't hear something coming from me, just don't listen to it. That's what I told him.
He says, if you don't hear something coming from me, just don't listen to it. But this flurry of predictions for Pappoe to Auburn are clearly coming from somewhere. It would seem like they almost have to be coming from the Pappoe camp, correct?
Yeah, it's interesting his words there, because listen, Kirby Smart has to look into it one way or another. You have to kind of feel if these prospects are leaning one way or other. Then you start asking these questions and you kind of divert and deflect. I really don't know what to think. I mean, you would be more plugged into it than me, but from everything I've read, it's an absolute 50-50 coin flip tonight with see where he lands. And we see it in the comment section too. People are saying, oh, this is an Auburn guy. He's going to end up going to Auburn. What a great job by Malzahn. You also have other people saying this is dogs all day, and he's just playing with them.
So my opinion on this is, and I obviously talk more about this on Dog Nation Daily this morning. That's the show that I do for Georgia fans in particular. It is undeniable that almost every smart, trusted source, expert, I shouldn't say source, but expert in this industry, it is undeniable that the overwhelming opinion right now is that Papo chooses Auburn. I expressed some skepticism about that this morning, that for me, it seems like there's the potential smokescreen here to Georgia. That's my opinion on this, and yet it cannot be denied that I am alone on an island in that regard right now. Virtually everyone that's willing to go on the record, as of late, is going on the record about Papo choosing Auburn.
Well, and then if I have to go on the record and talk about who I think he's going to pick, I don't think his recruitment's over. If you want really my honest opinion about it, I think no matter who he picks tonight, the other school is going to continue to recruit, and I wouldn't be shocked to see a flip either way somewhere down the road when we start getting closer to signing day. I think there's just too many things left to play out, and there's too many other decisions to be made to think that this is going to stick right here on the 1st of May. I just don't know if we're going to go that direction and have it stick all the way to signing.
Let me get a few comments here, then we're going to fly through some other topics here. Gary and Christian Gulisano says, if Morris chooses Tennessee, then it's his prediction that Papo would choose Georgia. That seems to make some sense to me here as well. You've got Auburn involved with multiple of these recruits. Does one guy's decision give you a tip-off and a clue about the other?
Well, I thought that all along, but I think Wanya Morris is such a Tennessee lean, and the Papo stuff to Auburn still keeps building up. And it's like you said, sometimes you have to kind of divert to the experts in this field and the experts in recruiting, and everybody's kind of pointing right now for Papo to Auburn and Wanya Morris to Tennessee. And so you kind of back off that and say, what do we have here? There's so many players in and around this program that are very good. Why, I kind of fall away from that because I'm saying, why is it these two guys? Are they that good of friends where you think they'll stick together? I don't know if that really is that big a deal for me.
Jason Hall in the Facebook comment section says, does Owen Papo want to be the next Roquan Smith? And obviously that's the label that we made some Alabama comparisons for Kevin Harris a moment ago, the label that Papo would enter Georgia with. And he wouldn't be the only linebacker who's been kind of given this tag, but he would be thought to be in that lineage of maybe the next Roquan Smith. Butkus Award winner for 2017. Papo is thought to be that kind of talent, highest spark score ever recorded in these Nike opening qualifier events, off the chart numbers here in 3 consecutive years going to these recruiting camp events.
Yeah, no, it's almost, for Alabama fans who are listening to it, almost reminds me a lot of like a Dylan Moses, a guy that's just extremely athletic, and you know that at one day will grow into an elite player at the position, whether that's next year or the year before, or the year after or somewhere down the road, you don't know. But when you do look at his score and you look at his 40 times and you look at the body of work and you see what his film kind of points out to you, there's no question this guy is an elite player as far as this class goes.
Let me pop over to YouTube here and get a couple comments. Actually, I got to pull my YouTube comment section up. We'll get some more comments here in a moment on that. I got to get everything kind of going on my end on this comment section. We'll do that. For now, let's move on to item number 2 on our SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. We just talked about the potential future of incoming players to the SEC. How about some outgoing players from the SEC to the next level in college football, maybe moving on to the NFL for 2019. ESPN and its NFL draft analyst Mel Kiper already talking about that in terms of his big board for 2019, the 2018 draft just barely over.
Yeah.
The 2019 board kind of already out there. Somebody kind of captured this on social media, and you see some SEC names on the list. Couple guys from Ole Miss on here. I see A.J. Brown there. I see Greg Little, the offensive lineman. I see Drew Lock, the quarterback from Missouri, pretty fascinating. Greedy Williams, the cornerback from LSU, and a couple of Alabama names with Raekwon Davis and Jonah Williams. What stands out to you about that list?
I'm not sold on the Drew Lock deal, right? I mean, we keep hearing Drew Lock's name, and I think he's got all the tangible, measurable type things you want really in a quarterback. But to me, when you look at what his numbers have been, and he has gotten better over his college career, but he's about to enter Derek Dooley's offense, right? And what is he going to be? Because he's been allowed to be a gunslinger for most of his career. Now, that could go one of two ways. Maybe Derek Dooley reels him in a little bit. Maybe he teaches him how to be a pro-style quarterback. Or maybe this offense doesn't work and it kind of flies off the rails. I think that, to me, is the biggest wild card when you look at those 6 guys listed. I'm also I'm sorry to Alabama fans. I'm just not that high on Jonah Williams playing left tackle right now. I think when you look at first-round draft picks, you got to be have that ability to really play left tackle. I think he's very athletic. I think he's a very good college left tackle. He's going to have to show me a little bit more this season. I think he was very good as a freshman at right tackle. Was not really the game-breaking left tackle that you wanted him to be last year at Alabama. He's going to have to show me some more this year as well.
Let me go back to your comments about Drew Lock for a moment, because I thought what you said there was pretty interesting. You're not sold on him yet. I have to admit I'm not either, especially for the reason you pointed out. I'm just not sure what Derek Dooley is going to bring to the table as an offensive coordinator. He's almost certainly going to be inferior to what Josh Heupel was for Locke a year ago, despite what everybody's saying, all the happy talk during the offseason. But let's say, hypothetically speaking for a moment, that Locke is that good. He is good enough to make good on Mel Kiper's early prediction of being a first-round pick for 2019. That's not just a significant story for Missouri, who admittedly we don't talk a lot about here on SEC Country Live. That's also a huge story for everybody in the SEC that has to play Missouri.
Right.
Because you're talking about Georgia going on the road to potentially face a first-round draft pick in his own stadium in September. That's a big deal. All of a sudden, that South Carolina game at home against Missouri doesn't feel like a given win anymore if you're facing Locke, who's maybe a better quarterback than what Jake Bentley's bringing to the table, if that description's true. Does a first-round performance from Drew Lock give Missouri a puncher's chance at Alabama in the middle of October? To say nothing about Kentucky and Florida, who may need that game for bowl eligibility. Tennessee, who's in the kind of the same boat. Arkansas, who in a rivalry game that needs whatever wins it can get. If Drew Lock is as good as Mel Kiper says he's going to be, this becomes a big deal for the teams that play Missouri as much as anything else.
No, I agree, and I think that we get so caught up in what Drew Lock's numbers are, or what his completion percentages are, and how he's throwing for 4,000 yards here, 4,000 yards there. I just don't believe we're going to see the same brand of Drew Lock. Now I know that obviously Derek Dooley is going to have a lot of the same system and try to have a lot of the turnover, but I'm not sure we're going to see those numbers. And so when those numbers start to dwindle a little bit for Drew Lock, do all of a sudden these NFL scouts and GMs start to fall out of love with him? Do you start not seeing the eye-popping numbers, and so you start looking at it and say, boy, you know what? His ratios aren't as good as I thought they were. He's throwing more interceptions than I thought he would. He's not as comfortable in this offense, this pro style of offense that we thought he might be. And so that's really the question I have for him. How well will he adapt to this new offense he's going to be running?
Stephen Kiger says Drew Lock's going to beat the teams he's supposed to beat, like Vanderbilt and Tennessee. Sad that Tennessee's on that list now. Who we've beat more than we lost to since joining the SEC. People forget when we had good coaching, won the SEC East the first 2 seasons. I'm looking for upsets all year. Watch out. That's Stephen, a good Missouri fan, weighing in on that. And Stephen, we appreciate your comment today. William Gunnings also asks, he's an Auburn fan, says, hey, what about Jarrett Stidham? Is he not a first-round draft pick in 2019? And we don't know. All we saw was like the top 10 from Mel Kiper. He didn't give us a full 32 list there. But if you want to just keep it to the SEC for a moment, I'll give you Drew Lock. I'll take Jarrett Stidham. I'm going to beat your brains in.
I'm the same way. No, I completely agree. And listen, I think Drew Lock is a good quarterback. But if we're talking about, keep in mind, like you said, this is the top 10 now. This is how early we're thinking about going in the top 10. I think you had him sitting right there at, what, 4? That's too much for me for Drew Lock. Give me Jarrett Stidham all day. I will take somebody that's running a little bit similar style system what he's going to be asked to do, has the run game behind him down at Auburn, understands kind of what he's being asked to do on that level. I'll take Jarrett Stidham all day.
2 real quick thoughts, and then we'll move on to a different subject. Raekwon Davis being on here shows you once again Alabama's got that trademark space-eating defensive lineman who was admittedly, for my favorite team, very tough on Georgia in the national championship game. One of the things that helps Alabama stay Alabama is having Raekwon Davis there in the middle.
So much leverage. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's 6'7" and all of a sudden has the power to go with it. Comes in looking more like a basketball player at times when he was young at Alabama. Now has the thickness and he can get the separation with those long arms. NFL scouts are going to be drooling over this guy's measurables next year.
And then Greedy Williams showing up on this list from LSU. I'm not quite sure how good I think LSU is going to be this season. The LSU fans who watch the show give me grief about that every single day. I am pretty confident in the LSU defense. Greedy Williams, sort of an as-advertised trademark LSU defensive back. We'll see him there. Let's do item number 3 here. And speaking of Georgia, Alabama, kind of an interesting comparison side by side between the sportsbook online sports betting house, BetDSI, who's got some updated national championship odds, including a few for SEC teams. We'll deal with a few of these throughout the show. Let me start with the 2 SEC teams who have the best odds to win the national championship. And I should point out that I kind of converted these odds into something that's a little bit more understandable. Alabama's not exactly 2-1. They're sort of approximately 2-1.
Yeah.
They're like plus 225. So they're about 2-1. Georgia is exactly 10-1 to win the national championship. So with those odds, who has the better chance? Alabama at 2-1 or Georgia at 10-1?
Now let's just make this clear. Now you're asking me.
Better bet. Not who's more likely to win the championship, but better bet.
I'm just trying to get the Bama fans off my back before I let this next
You bet
part out.
100 on Georgia, you get 1,000 back if they win. You bet 100 on Alabama, you only get 200 back if they win. So there's a lot more to gain by betting Georgia, which is an important factor here.
No, that's the factor, and for that reason, I am going with Georgia in this discussion. I think Alabama, obviously, you've made all the playoffs, you won 5 of the last 9. There's a reason they're sitting there at 2.25 to 1 to win the national title. It's because they've proven more times than not that they can get there and get it done under Nick Saban. But give me the 10-1 odds. Give me Kirby Smart and a team that lost in double overtime last year, so you came that close to winning the national title and return a ton of talent. Give me those odds at 10-1, risking 100 to win 1,000. I'm taking that all day.
Jeremy Bailey on our Facebook comment section says Alabama's going for 18. They may very well get there, but I have a hard time buying into Alabama as just slightly above an even money favorite here.
Yeah.
The odds of Alabama winning the national championship are about as good as your odds in a single hand of blackjack. That's too much love for me for an Alabama team that's going to play in a conference where I believe Auburn's probably a top 10 team. I believe that Georgia's probably a top 5 team. Doesn't mean that Alabama can't emerge from that group, but in terms of, as I said, almost an even money favorite win the national championship, that's way, way too much love for Alabama.
Right, and it's somewhere obviously between reality and what what the expectations are, right? You kind of have to ride the line if you're a Vegas odds maker and understand why they're doing it. And I think Mike Johnson's daddy.
We finally got him to read it. Good job, Daddy.
I couldn't say it with a straight face. Mike Johnson's daddy on YouTube brings up a good point. Bet on both of them and win money either way, because I think that's probably the way I'd go if I'm actually landing.
It is actually a fairly good point. I mean, I think one of the tough things about college football as of late is the number of teams in a given year that can win a national championship is getting shorter and shorter and shorter every year.
Yeah.
This year's national champion, like virtually all of them, if you give me Georgia and Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State, and then maybe one more 5th team, not a Big 12 team, probably not a Pac-12 team, but like one more sort of 5th team just to give yourself a little bit better odds, your chance to win the national championship at that point in time, I mean, just those 5 teams alone are going to own the next 19 of the next 20 national championships or something like that.
I disagree. To me, I think this year and probably next year, you're definitely looking at something that's getting a lot smaller, but 3 years down the road, you can make a case that Texas is going to climb back nationally. They're getting a ton of talent on campus over at Texas. You can make the case that Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher, maybe he can build back into something. I think that you look at some of the other teams out west really doing some good things in the Pac-12, and the Big Ten's still strong. I think that 3 years from now, when you start climbing back into that, I would expect that Florida at some point climbs back to be nationally relevant. I just think that some of these programs that are national powerhouses have been down for the last few years. I think that's going to start to expand here in the next
For now, though, the 2 teams we just compared side by side, Georgia and Alabama, it appears they're heading for quite a battle. Maybe in December for the SEC championship, maybe with talent into future NFL drafts, on signing day, and a whole lot more. We played some audio yesterday of Marcus Spears talking about that very point from the SEC Network. Here is it once again as a reminder.
We're about to see Georgia and Alabama go at it for years to come. You look at the 2 coaches, same philosophy. They want the same type of football player. Right. I mean, when you look at Roquan Smith and Rashaan Evans, there's a lot of comparables. Roquan Smith is better, but there's a lot of comparables. 2 guys that can play sideline to sideline and that are fast. But you look at the lifeblood of these universities, it is recruiting. All right. What was the top team in the SEC years ago? LSU. Coincidentally, it was a bunch of dudes going in the first round. Right. So that trend has already been a foregone conclusion at Alabama. Kirby is about to start it up.
On YouTube, Cliff Nelson says, I think Penn State has a chance to be relevant, and they do have a chance. Yeah. I think Shea Patterson at Michigan has a chance to be relevant, but for the very reasons that Marcus Spears just said, the elite talent that's being hoarded by Alabama, being hoarded by Georgia. Ohio State's doing a lot of that. Clemson's doing a lot of that. There's room for a 5th, and it'll be kind of a revolving door who that 5th is. There's just going to be that gap between the Michigans and the Penn States and everybody else. They got a chance to be there for sure, but it's not. 3/4 of Alabama's roster is former 4- and 5-star players coming out of high school. About 2/3 of Georgia's roster is former 4- and 5-star players coming out of high school. That is an overwhelming level of talent that even for SEC teams, it's just really, really hard to match.
Yeah, I agree with you to an extent, but to me, I think there's a way to climb back into that conversation with recruits by being able to point out a winning season. I think Clemson kind of did it backwards that way, right? I think Clemson kind of crawled out from under the rock that they were under Clemson. You start winning games.
No pun intended.
Yeah. No pun intended. They start winning games, and all of a sudden everybody starts taking notice. And now after all that, Clemson is a recruiting powerhouse. 5 years ago, Clemson wasn't that big of a recruiting powerhouse. So I think they've played their way out of that. And I think that really, if you're one of those teams kind of looking up at Georgia and Alabama, that's the way you have to feel about it. We got to climb back out from this and start winning some games with good coaching.
By the way, Clemson, one of the few teams, according to DSI, with better odds than Georgia win the national championship. They're kind of tucked right there below Alabama, who, as we said, was almost 2-1 to win the title again here in the 2018 season. Let's do item number 4 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And to start with, I want to go back to last summer when Ed Orgeron was speaking at SEC Media Days. He was asked about his performance as interim head coach at LSU in the 10-0 game against Alabama that his team almost won. And heading into the 2017 season, Orgeron was sort of feeling very good about what the future might be there for LSU, thinking the gap between his team and the Crimson Tide may be not all that significant. Here's Orgeron from last summer.
Last year was a very tight game. It was 0-0 going into the third quarter. Their quarterback made 2 plays. We didn't. So I don't know if there's that big of a gap.
So maybe in his mind, not that big of a gap between the two teams after the 2016 season. The gap would have seemed to have grown a bit during the 2017 season. Alabama goes on to win the national championship once again. LSU loses to Troy. Does sort of rebound a bit at the end of the season, but right now LSU does not appear to be on the same trajectory as Alabama is, so much so that when Clay Travis talked to SEC Country, Travis was suggesting that Orgeron was on the hot seat and there may be some pretty high-profile potential replacements here. Here's a pretty provocative quote from the personality, I guess we'll call him, Clay Travis, who spoke to our Andrew Astleford from SEC Country, saying, if I were running LSU, at the end of this year, if it goes as I'm anticipating and LSU goes 8-4-ish, then I think there are 3 great coaches out there that would win at a really high level at LSU. Now, off the top of my head, I don't know whether they'd be willing to make the move, but I think Bobby Petrino, Lane Kiffin, and one name that might surprise some people, Hugh Freeze, are all sitting out there. That would be very dynamic on the offensive side of the ball and be a lot more successful than LSU has been so far under Coach O. Now, I can't think of 3 more provocative names.
I can't either.
Than Petrino, Lane Kiffin, and Hugh Freeze.
I feel like Clay Travis is trolling LSU fans, right?
But, okay, so I guess what I want to say about this is, on the one hand, if it fails for LSU with Ed Orgeron this year, I don't think they're firing him after the 2018 season. I think this list from Travis is pretty entertaining. If it fails for Orgeron this year, the reason why it will fail are the exact problems that Kiffin and Hugh Freeze and Bobby Petrino would correct. Those are all elite offensive minds. They are disasters off the football field for slightly different reasons. But they are elite, supreme offensive minds. So
actually, I don't know if the reasons are all that different.
Yeah, actually they may be fairly similar. Now that I think about it, I'll just leave that at that. But they are terrific offensive minds. So is the list that ridiculous if we know what has truly ailed LSU?
I cannot believe the Hugh Freeze thing to me so far out there. Listen, if you can't hire him as an analyst at Alabama, what makes you think LSU is going to hire him?
Yeah, Nick Saban got his hand slapped for wanting to be an intern with Butch Jones. Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
The Lane Kiffin thing to me, I don't see that either. I mean, Ed Orgeron wanted to hire Lane Kiffin as an offensive coordinator at LSU. I can't imagine circling back around and Lane Kiffin becoming the head coach. I just think that doesn't really fit. I don't think those cultures mix. LSU and Lane Kiffin, I don't think that really sticks together. Now, the question I have here is, will LSU pull an Auburn in the middle of the night, go see Bobby Petrino up in Louisville and see if they can't lure him down while maybe Ed Orgeron's still in the job? Because I feel like that's the situation we're going to get into here. If he's not pulling in the big-time recruits and Ed Orgeron starts slipping as far as the game performance goes, LSU's head might be on a swivel mid-season saying, is there any upgrades out there? Now, it's not like they're going to fire Ed Orgeron and start the search process, not in my mind, not right away. But I think the feelers are going to be out there, hey, what else can we get in here?
I would give anything if we had this picture to show. I don't think we do. The picture of Bobby Petrino, where he's got the neck brace on after his motorcycle accident when he had the gal in the back with him, I think that photo alone makes him unhireable by an SEC program.
Yeah, it's tough.
I really do. I don't think that Petrino could be hired by another SEC school ever again. I think that Louisville is, the best I can tell, a glorified high school. They don't seem to have a whole lot of standards when it comes to stuff like that. Just look what happened with Rick Pitino as the basketball coach. They don't care about stuff like that. In the SEC, there's just too much infighting between the fan bases. The only photo you'd ever see an opposing fan base sort of use and show for Bobby Petrino is that neck brace photo. It's just too damning to make him the head coach there. Hugh Freeze the same way. Now, I won't pretend to be an expert on these NCAA sanctions. The 2-game suspension, I think that may expire after just 1 year. He may not even be subject to a 2-game suspension as a head coach. But the fact that your first press conference with him would be, and good news, he doesn't have to serve a 2-game suspension because here's the technicality that means that's expired.
Yeah.
That's just too gross for an SEC team to get into.
No, I agree with you. And obviously, LSU fans in the YouTube comment section chiming in. Cliff Nelson says he couldn't see Lane Kiffin or Petrino being a head coach down at LSU. And there's just a ton of questions. Man, I told you before, going around the Falcons complex shortly thereafter Petrino left, 2 years after Petrino left, there was no love lost for this guy. I mean, people absolutely hated this guy around that organization, called him a snake, said he was dirty, said everything bad you can possibly say about him. So I don't think I wish that on LSU for Bobby Petrino to be hired down there. I'm with you. He's a good coach. They're all three great offensive coaches and play callers, but to what detriment? I mean, I think if you're going to go that route to me and you're willing to accept a Bobby Petrino as a head coach, I'm calling Mike Leach up at Washington State and saying, hey, remember Tennessee called? I'm ready to have you down in Baton Rouge.
Man, you can't have that clown coaching in the SEC.
You can't have either one of these three either. I mean, he's no worse than either one of these three. He's just weird, and he can coach offense.
For the he's more than just weird.
Can you imagine his offense with those wide receivers?
He sued his previous employer. That is I mean, ask anybody you know that works in HR. Someone who sued their previous employer has a giant red X next to their name.
Listen, I know a lot about that story, and I'm still on Mike Leach's side of that.
Well, there you go. I'm glad to know you're on his side.
Yeah,
one more quick point on this. I think the idea of Lane Kiffin one day coaching in the SEC again as a head coach is mostly overblown for this reason. He's only popular. He's mostly popular when he has very little responsibility. As Alabama offensive coordinator, all he's doing is dialing up his plays. He's not speaking to the media. Everybody loves him. As FAU coach, he doesn't have a lot of responsibility.
Right.
He's tweeting all the dadgum time. Everybody loves him. When he's Tennessee head coach, when he's USC head coach, when he's Raiders coach, that's a lot of responsibility. Nobody likes him then.
Yeah.
He's the kind of guy that's good at offense, good at running plays, maybe not great at running a program.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was given the opportunity at USC to be a part of a top tier program and to run that program, and was run out. I mean, he was dropped off at the airport, for God's sakes. He was fired at the airport, getting off the plane or getting on the plane or whatever it was over there at USC. So, to me, what's the lessons that Lane Kiffin learned at Alabama? They're really that strong to where you can invite him back to a top tier program. Like I said at the top, Clay Travis, to me, none of these names are really the guy that I would turn to if LSU is in trouble.
Bill Anderson says he thinks that Mike Leach, your idea, would be great at LSU. I don't know, y'all. That feels like, now it's a pretty interesting sort of like odd couple type marriage of the Louisiana folks and Leach, but I don't know about that.
No, I'm telling you, you LSU fans, you let us know in the comment section what you think. With Mike Leach to LSU, would that ever work? Now, Ed Orgeron aside, your love for Ed Orgeron aside, would Mike Leach ever work?
One final serious point on this, Marcus Collins says, LSU's next head coach who's already coaching the defense is Dave Aranda.
Dave Aranda.
I feel like Aranda probably leaves somewhere after this year, and I feel like Orgeron's getting at least one more year. I think
that's a Gus Malzahn, circle back around?
Maybe so.
Get out of town so the guy can
I think it's
fired.
hard to promote a defensive coordinator from a coaching staff where you wanted to fire the head coach. We virtually never see that. We see successful head coaches move on and the coordinator kind of move in place. We almost very rarely see an unsuccessful head coach move on and the coordinator get promoted.
It's tough to it's tough to look at opportunities. I mean, I guess you look at Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Bowden in terms of coordinators taking over and actually doing.
That was a true coach and waiting situation,
right.
which we almost never see anymore.
Yeah, you don't. Well, I think it's illegal now to have a coach and waiting.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and so
it's not technically illegal. It's highly restrictive based on NCAA rules.
And Cliff Nelson says Mike Leach on Bourbon Street would be classic. Boy, I gotta agree with that. That I'm telling you right now, like, I don't know if I want Mike Leach as my head coach, but as an SEC guy, I'm hoping at one point this guy makes it to our league.
All right, let's fly through here and do item number 5 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Haven't talked a lot of Gators here so far this week. Let's change that right now. I thought the Florida guys who do the podcast for SEC Country got into a pretty interesting conversation this week. I'm going to let you hear specifically from Zach Alberti, who always does a great job covering the Gators for SEC country, about a debate that's out there about how many true star players Florida has for 2018. Now, we can all remember a time when Florida was loaded with stars on both sides of the ball. Maybe there's some thought right now that there aren't enough star players at Florida to truly pull them out of the doldrums that Jim McElwain had that program a season ago. Zach says a couple guys on both sides of the ball may do something to confound that expectation and change that narrative. First on offense, where Zach Abolverdi, who knows Florida well, says, I think there are two potential stars, one at running back, and then if they can get some luck from the NCAA, one at wide receiver as well. Here is Zach.
When you look at Florida and try to find someone to point to and say, oh, this is a star player, you're also going to look at last year's results to kind of give you that backing. And the fact that Scarlett didn't play, I think, out of sight, out of mind, right, Jeff? I mean,
sure.
He doesn't come to mind when you think about Florida right now, unless you've been in Gainesville and you've seen what he's looked like since he returned. And when you go watch that guy on the practice field, if you've been in Gainesville and watched, that's a guy that should be about getting ready to play in the NFL right now. I mean, that's how good Jordan Scarlett is. That's how good he would have been last season had he played. He is, without a doubt, a star player on Florida's football team. And another guy that fits that category who's shown it in spring and is going to show it this fall, and he's shown it before in the SEC, is Van Jefferson, who, like Scarlett, was also not playing for Florida last season. So I think that once he gets added to the mix, which I think everybody expects now because of the Shea Patterson news, you're adding not only another star player, but another star player on the offensive side of the ball.
So you hear from Zach Abolverdi that says, slow down on saying Florida doesn't have any star playmaking talent. Scarlett, who we did not see last year because of the whatever went on with that credit card issue, and Van Jefferson, who we, if you're a Florida fan, hope to see in 2018 based on his transfer appeal there from Ole Miss. He says those are guys who are playmaking stars for the Florida offense. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. Listen, I love what Jordan Scarlett brings to the table. I think watching him throughout spring, seeing some of the things he can do, I think it was detrimental to this team last year to be missing a guy like that. I also love Van Jefferson. He's not going to bring the baggage that Antonio Callaway had. You're hoping with the Shea Patterson news that came out that you can plug Van Jefferson right in alongside the Ohio State transfer possibly and get things going in the passing game. I also think that you look at Martez Ivey as a possible star along that offensive line. He wasn't there last year. I've mentioned a million times. I think he was out of shape. I think he was overweight. I don't think he could finish playing the left tackle position, but somewhere along the offensive line, getting him in shape, getting him to play at a high level. I love Martez Ivey as a possible star on that offensive side of the ball.
Zach Borthwick says, stars don't mean everything. Don't you know this? I would counter back that and say in these really tightly contested, close, hard-fought SEC football games, the team with the most star players is going to win at least the majority of the time. That's why a conversation like this for Florida is so relevant.
No, I completely agree. And I think when you look, to me, when you look at the defensive side of the ball, you have to look no further than cornerback for them. I mean, the star player kind of mantra in terms of having stars, it's always going to be the offensive side of the ball, right? They're always going to be the quarterbacks and the wide receivers and the running backs. Look at those cornerbacks. Give me Marco Wilson. Give me C.J. Henderson. Give me Chauncey Gardner in that nickel spot. Those are stars in the making. That's what Florida has hung their hat on for so long, is guys back in that second year that really have held that team together.
Speaking of that, Zach Abolverdi also weighing in on that Florida defense. You mentioned Marco Wilson. Zach does too. He's also got one more name in mind. Here's Zach Abolverdi on some potential stars on the Florida defense.
I can remember watching and tweeting at times during CeCe's career that Florida needs more players like him, because he has shown at times flashes of that first-round potential, of that five-star ability. And I just think at times he's not been put in a great situation where he was fitting the role that he was asked to play in. I don't think that that's going to be the case this year under Todd Grantham. I think he's going to be another example of a guy that's going to benefit from having a new coaching staff. Now, I'm only going to list one more that I think right now you can say without a doubt fits in that star category. That's Marco Wilson. This guy is a future NFL player. You can see it. Anybody that knows the game and watches and knows cornerbacks can see that this guy has it. He's only going into his sophomore season, but he, without a doubt, I think fits that bill as well.
AJ Murphy on Facebook says Florida absolutely has enough talent. Names like Chauncey Gardner, Marco Wilson, C.J. Henderson, Jordan Scarlett, Michael Pirine, Kadarius Toney, all future NFL draft picks, and that's just scratching the surface. So talent's not the problem, never was. How do you continuously put out NFL talent and have mediocre seasons? Maybe you guys can put your finger on it, LOL. I guess, AJ, the only thing I'll say is, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, the list of names that AJ just mentioned and maybe some of the names that you just heard Zach Abolverdi mention, Are they star players by the typical Florida standard, which going back to like say 2009 with Urban Meyer or 1996 with Steve Spurrier? That's my definition of a Florida star. It's Jaquez Green, and it's it's Javon Curse.
Right.
Are there Jaquez Greens and Javon Curses in this Florida team? Because when I think about stars in Gainesville, it's names like that come to mind for me.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with Percy Harvin.
Yeah.
That's the kind of guys I think of. Even listen, I used to love watching film and watching the Pouncey twins go at it when they were playing that offensive line. Those were star players, and you are absolutely right. But I do hear names like C.C. Jefferson, like you mentioned, and I just think that these guys, for whatever reason, have not fit in the system well and have been suspended or have mistimed or have been out of shape. It just hasn't come together. And there's also the fact that you haven't had a star quarterback in 10 years. I mean, 8 years, whatever, dating back to Tim Tebow. Haven't had the star quarterback, haven't been able to really get great numbers out of the wide receiver position. I mean, Taven Bryan's a great example. That could have been a star player, a first-round draft pick. You're just not getting what you need to out of him because he's one of those guys that just kind of gets lost in the system and doesn't really play the role that he's probably meant to play.
Rick Keene says, who is a big Gators fan, says Florida has some great potential game changers if we have a quarterback who can get the ball. Tony's uncoverable. Jefferson's a great route runner, but the only star that Franks can't miss is a handoff to Scarlett. And from that standpoint, maybe that makes Scarlett the most important name in this entire conversation because I think we've seen a lot of Felipe Franks. The expectation that he might somehow make some sort of dramatic leap forward on the field in 2018 just because he's working with who might be a better quarterbacks coach, Dan Mullen, than what Jim McElwain and Doug Nussmeier were, that may be wishful thinking. But a better running game certainly makes Frank's job easier.
A better running game and better protection. I can't tell you how much I was disappointed in Florida's offensive line last year. It just, to me, the power is there. I mean, the star power is there. And that's not to say that they're going to be the best offensive line in the SEC. I don't expect that. But they should be definitely well above average. They should be in the top 4 offensive lines in the SEC with the numbers they have. I love Jawan Taylor. He took a step back last year. Martez Ivey was not what he should have been. There's a couple other positions along that offensive line that aren't what they should be. And for that reason, for all that coming together, and you hope that hiring a new head coach helps that, I have to think that some of these guys are going to develop into names that you're going to know more about at the end of the year.
This is kind of an interesting comment. One more on this subject, then we'll change the subject. Brock Weaver, who's an Auburn fan, says, give Mullen a couple years and he's going to have Florida contender. He's done the most with the least. Put your money on that. And he even drops a WDE in there at the end to show his love for Auburn. But that's an Auburn guy talking up Dan Mullen, which is kind of an interesting point to end that discussion on. Speaking of Auburn, let's make them the topic right up number 6 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And, if you want to go back to not all that long ago when Gus Malzahn was looking ahead to the 2018 season, he was pretty confident about his team and what he brings back. And his main reason for feeling confident about that was, as he's pointed out, his team beat Alabama. He thinks they were the only ones capable of doing so. Here's Gus Malzahn.
We got a lot of guys coming back, and we felt all along this year that we were the only team that could beat Alabama. Of course, they ended up being that way, and we got a lot of guys coming back. I know they're very hungry, and anytime you've been close and you have everybody coming back or a lot of guys coming back, it really helps you. And I know we're going to be a hungry team. Now, you got to earn it in our league. The SEC West is a monster. Every week you got to bring your lunch, but I really like where we're at.
So the reigning Iron Bowl champs, the SEC West winners with the ring to prove it. That's Gus Malzahn's thought on 2018. But let's check in on their national championship odds here. Once again, courtesy of BetDSI. We showed you this a moment ago for Georgia and Alabama. How about a side-by-side comparison between Auburn and LSU? Auburn at 25-1, LSU at 30-1. Now, earlier you took the longer shot Georgia over Alabama in terms of a value play. 25-1, 30-1 in the comparison between LSU and Auburn. Who's the better bet here?
Yeah, this one's tough for me, and I think that I'm not as high on Auburn as you have been. I just think it's a lot to ask to replace those three starting offensive linemen, the offensive line coach, and both the running backs in the backfield. That's what they have been. But give me the program that returns both coordinators from last year, and that's Auburn football. That's consistency at the coaching position, and that's what you need. You add in the fact that their front seven is going to be very scary to a lot of different football teams, and I'm taking Auburn all day at 25-1. Listen, and that's not to say that I'm as down on LSU as some are, but Ed Orgeron's got some question to answer, and I got to see what's going to come out of this new offense under Steve Ensminger before I'm picking them at 30-1.
A moment ago, this is actually a pretty monumental day here for SEC Country Live because a moment ago we saw an Auburn fan say something nice about Florida. We've got a Florida fan saying something nice about Auburn.
Hey.
Greg Steele, who's a big Gators fan, says Auburn all day on that bet. In other words, he likes Auburn at 25-1 in comparison to LSU at 30-1.
I'm the same way.
Listen, all those LSU folks over on YouTube are going to start giving me grief again. They're going to be at my neck over this one. But LSU at 30-1, which from a national championship perspective, given the fact there are 130 teams, is actually fairly good odds win the national title. This feels like something from like 2010 or 2011. I mean, those odds feel like they're some sort of dusty relic of some sort of bygone age, back when LSU was still pumping out first-round draft picks over and over again. For now, this is not that LSU.
Yeah, and listen, Auburn had some big wins last year. They also collapsed at times when they probably shouldn't have, and for that reason, that's why I say, give me the consistency of having the coordinators back. It's not that I think LSU is going to be a bad team, but if you're going to put LSU in the national championship game, and I think LSU fans will admit this as well, there's a lot of different things that have to go perfectly for LSU to be able to get into that situation. The offensive line has to develop. The running backs have to come together in a big way. Terrence Alexander, the transfer from Stanford, has to be a star. Braden Fehoko has to be a star. Not to say it won't happen, but there's a lot of different things that really have to develop and go exactly the way you want them to if LSU is going to find themselves.
Esteban Esteves on YouTube says LSU is going to bust some teams in the mouth this year. I'm telling y'all, LSU is going to be back in the spotlight again. So Esteban likes his team. Tyler Mann says I'm an LSU hater. I knew that was coming. A lot of these LSU guys give me a lot of grief these days.
Yeah, they definitely do. Listen, I'm getting grief from Auburn fans right now. You weren't high on them last year, and they whooped your boys. Ha ha, WDE. Picked Auburn, but LSU beat them last year. And listen, that's what you wrestle over. If you are going with Auburn in this debate, is the fact that LSU is the one that beat Auburn last year. And really, I said this a million times about Gus Malzahn last year. If Gus Malzahn would have lost that LSU game in the BCS era, that takes them out of playoff contention. That takes them out of contention to possibly win a national title. And Gus Malzahn is much firmer on the hot seat at that point than he ever was last year because he had a way to play his way back into it.
Michael Clyburn says, who's a Mississippi State fan, he says it doesn't matter about LSU or Auburn. Mississippi State's going to beat them both. We're actually going to talk about the Bulldogs championship odds here in a moment. But let me sort of make a quick final point on this subject. It's sort of an indefensible position. I'm going to try to defend it anyway. Auburn beating Alabama is a much bigger deal than LSU beating Auburn because Alabama losses are just more rare. So if you want to say, like, what means the most from last year, LSU saying we beat Auburn, that only holds so much water for me. But go back and look at the last 10 years. How many Alabama losses have there been? There haven't been that many. So for Auburn in 2017 to be toting one of them right here heading into 2018, that's a much bigger deal than LSU's victory in pocket against Auburn.
I tend to agree. I mean, listen, LSU beat Auburn. They also lost by 30 to Mississippi State and lost to Troy. I mean, it is what it is. Those are the facts from last season. The fact is that Auburn, they're going out and beating Georgia and Alabama, and then they lose to an LSU team that really was outmanned on that field. That's why I have so many questions about Gus Malzahn. But we're talking about national title odds. We're not talking about teams going head-to-head or who's going to win that game this year. We're talking about the path to get to the national title and which odds you're going to take. And I think Auburn has just been too consistent over the long run. Now, I'm not talking about game to game. I'm talking about over Gus Malzahn's tenure have shown the ability to be an overachieving football team. And so I got to take the odds on them.
Over on YouTube, Dwayne Rourke, who's a big Arkansas fan, and we haven't heard from Dwayne in a while, by the way. It's good to hear from Dwayne today. He says, the Gus Bus is never going to be the consistent coach he needs to be to truly dominate the SEC ever. That's worth pointing out here. Hogs fans hate Malzahn right now. So there's some of that dripping in that comment. But that's an issue you pointed to a lot here as well, that what you view as sort of a lack of consistency for Malzahn at Auburn.
It just take him away from, and this is why I keep bringing up the Washington game to start the year. Does that derail Auburn's season before it even gets started? Because Gus Malzahn did not prove last year that taking himself away from Jordan Hare Stadium and taking this team away did not prove that they could be the same football team. And it's not just Auburn and Georgia at home, it's what you did away. And you lost to LSU, you lost to Clemson in an ugly game, even though the score wasn't lopsided. You lost to UCF, and you lost to Georgia, a team that you had beat a couple weeks earlier. I have to see that going on the road. And you named the two road games this year, Alabama and Georgia, number 1 and number 3 right now. That's a tough hill to climb for me.
Auburn by 2 touchdowns over Washington. A bunch of hipster Bernie bros are not coming down south and beating Auburn in Atlanta.
Well, we sat here and said the same thing about UCF and Auburn when they played in the exact same place. I mean, you just thought there was no way, and yet Auburn shows up kind of flat-footed. I'm with you. Now, I hope you're right. I really do. I want Auburn to carry that torch for the SEC. I don't want the Pac-12 having any type of bragging rights over what the SEC is doing. And I hope you're right. But I am concerned about it.
Item number 7 on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. Dennis Dodd, longtime venerable name covering college football for CBS Sports, has his post-spring preseason top 25. I thought this was pretty interesting for some of the SEC teams that are on the list and a few of the SEC teams that are not. You can check out the full list at cbssports.com. Let me show you the SEC names here, though. He's got Alabama at 1, Georgia at 3, Auburn at 10. No real debate so far. Mississippi State at 11, the highest I've seen the Bulldogs in any preseason top 25, although admittedly I may not have seen them all. Maybe a somewhat surprising entrant, Texas A&M at 21. He's got Florida in at 22, and then Dennis Dodd finishes with LSU at 25. The Florida, the LSU, once again, this just feels like, old dog, can't learn new tricks. This is not 10 years ago. Florida and LSU, for me right now, neither one of those teams are top 25 teams.
Yeah, I mean, I would make the argument that LSU can – I just think that LSU's defensive talent right now puts them in the top 25. I mean, Dave Aranda's a great defensive coordinator. They have a great defensive line right now. I think they have a great linebacking core, and they have some missing pieces in the secondary, but they could climb that way. So I think the defense alone, for me, kind of moves LSU into that conversation. Florida, to me, they do have a lot to prove. Now, this is obviously a projection, and I think Florida's going to be a good football team, but they're both still, for me, hovering around that 8-win plateau, and does that keep you in the top 25? I don't know.
However, for me, the most significant story here for this sort of venerable college football name is, where is South Carolina? Why is South Carolina not on this list? And for me, it's going to have to come at the expense of a Texas A&M, who South Carolina does play, maybe an LSU as well, certainly Florida, who the Gamecocks play. To me, South Carolina much more likely to be in the top 25 than A&M, who I think is going to be good eventually, but not probably in 2018. A&M, LSU, Florida. I got South Carolina over all three of those teams. We can debate the three SEC teams up at the top or kind of where Mississippi State goes, but for the most part, we're all in general agreement. But South Carolina, as an unranked team from Dennis Dodd, way better than the three teams who are ranked, to me.
I'm not sure you're right. I think that we look at Deebo Samuel coming off an injury. I think we look at Jake Bentley and think of what he could be. I think you look at some of the running backs they're going to have. I think they've got some pieces. But to me, there was too many close games last year where somehow South Carolina found a way to do it. And I think that just comes back to the mean this year. I really do. I think that when you look at South Carolina's team, they will take strides. They'll look like a more efficient football team this year. But am I penciling them in for wins against Florida and some of the other teams they're going to face all year? Absolutely not. I think they're going to have to find a way to win those games.
But you say Deebo Samuel coming back off an injury. There's no reason to believe he won't be healthy. And if he is healthy, he's a better player than anybody on the A&M roster, than anybody on the LSU roster, than anybody on the Florida roster. Deebo Samuel, wow. Go back and look at what he did in the 2 games he was healthy. This is a dynamic playmaker. Talk about bona fide stars. Deebo Samuel, in terms of a dynamic playmaker, is better than what any of those guys are going to bring to the table. Now you're going to say Devin White's a higher draft pick. That's fine. You're going to say quarterback, which LSU, or I should say A&M has 2 of, maybe a more important position. That's fine. Dynamic playmakers, nobody rivals what Deebo Samuel does for South Carolina.
You can definitely make that argument. I mean, I disagree with that. I think when you look at some of Florida stars and some of LSU stars, I just think there is a ton of star power in the making. And I'm just not sold that Jake Bentley to Deebo Samuel is going to be the dynamic duo.
It's kick returns, though. It's kick returns.
That's
still
true.
a factor.
That's
you
true.
can still return them.
I would make the argument that you have Jamon Osmond down at Texas A&M that's going to take Christian Kirk's spot. I think he's going to be electric this year. I think that there's a lot of different angles to look at, and coming back off an injury like that is not as easy as some people make it out to be.
All right, item number 8 on our SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. We started the show today by talking about the Grayson 4 making their decisions at an event in Atlanta tonight, and Auburn hoping for good news maybe from 2 of those 4 players from the Atlanta area who will be making their college decision. It could be the sort of continuation of what's been some recruiting momentum for Auburn as of late. Is Jalen Simpson, a 4-star defensive back from Fort Frederica Academy down in South Georgia in the St. Simons, coastal Georgia area. Simpson's made his college decision, and he's chosen Auburn, making it official here on social media, saying respect it, which I kind of like. You see the edits on the side and the text there in the middle. Simpson's also a high school teammate from another 4-star athlete, Deshaun Sheffield, who's also thought to be a strong Auburn lean here at the moment. Is this Auburn actually building a couple things here that it really needs? Recruiting momentum for 2019, but an inroad back to the state of Georgia here with Wanya Morris and Owen Popo about to announce their decision later on?
It definitely could be. I mean, if you couple this, now if you're an Auburn fan, you've got to be hoping this is the scenario, but if you couple this with a Popo decision to Auburn later on, there's no other way to look at that than Auburn is steamrolling at this point. I mean, I mentioned earlier, 32nd to 25th with the commitment of Jalen Simpson. Think of how much higher they're going to jump with the Papo. And you're talking about possibly jumping, what, 15 spots in a matter of 3 days in terms of what the recruiting is. And before that Simpson commitment, this is a team that had 4 commitments leading into that. You had to think that at some point Malzahn was going to start getting back on track and start doing the things that he's used to doing down there at Auburn. We talked about this on signing day. There was no like splashes for Auburn. It's kind of ho-hum for Gus Malzahn to sit there right inside or outside of the top 10 as far as recruiting, and I know he'll get back to that point. It's consistency over the long run. This is the first step in getting back to that
Hearing
point.
from a few Auburn fans here, including Travis Betbees, who says, I think we miss on Wanye Morris tonight. That's an Auburn guy weighing in on that. Brock Weaver says, hey, it's too early for this. These kids change their minds like they change their underwear. But John Smith's response to that is, yeah, but Auburn needs recruits big time. And from that standpoint, because Auburn had what I would describe as limited success in the state of Georgia a year ago, that's one of these commitments, and that's all they are right now. These commitments would still matter for Auburn.
Well, and we've seen the ability of these things to gain steam, haven't we? Even if Papo commits tonight and doesn't end up going to Auburn, ends up flipping on signing day, we've seen these things gain steam. We've seen, boy, you know what? We've got this 5-star on campus. We've got this guy that wants to recruit for us. We've got, we're building something here, and that can gain steam. All of a sudden, these coaches, instead of saying, come be a part of this team, come be a part of this signing class. Look like we've got going on here. We're doing some really good things. And so that's why I think it's an important piece. Whether or not Papo signs to Georgia, to me, is secondary.
Let's do item number 9 on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. Bet DSI odds for the national championship. Let's check in on them one more time. Michael Clyburn, one of our Mississippi State fans who comments on Facebook, mentioned a moment ago. How about the Bulldogs? Where do they rank on this list? Well, they're among what I sort of call some of the long shots, but pretty intriguing odds here. Florida at 70-1, so clearly the betting public high on the Gators, at least in comparison to the rest of the SEC, almost like the rider Dennis Dodd was. Mississippi State at 110-1, Arkansas 150-1, South Carolina, Tennessee, both 250-1. And these are the only SEC teams that Bet DSI is publishing odds for right now. And I should also point out, I converted these odds into like sort of easier to understand numbers as opposed to like the plus 2,500, the way that you find if you actually go to the Bet DSI site on that. At those odds, who's the best long shot to win the national championship?
I think it's a tough decision. I don't.
Time out for 1 second. I also realized looking at this graphic, I left off Texas A&M, which is at 80-1. I should point that out.
Listen, I'm high on Texas A&M this year. Have you seen their away schedule?
Yes.
That's a big mountain to climb.
Yeah, you got Clemson there too.
Not only, you add Clemson that's coming too there. I mean, Texas A&M's away schedule is at Bama, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, and at Auburn. I mean, that might be the toughest away schedule in the conference. So at 80-1, I'm probably not going to go that route. Mississippi State at 110-1. I don't know. To me, when's the last time a first-year head coach has won the national title at a new school?
Probably your boy at Miami who was coaching at Texas San Antonio 3 years later. Larry Coker, I guess. Yeah,
Larry Coker. So that's tough for me. When you look at these schools, all those schools, including Texas A&M, other than South Carolina, are all first-year head coaches.
Give me South Carolina 250-1. 250-1?
No.
$100 bets on to pay me back $2,500.
How is Arkansas at 150-1 , by the way?
They're just making these stuff.
How is Arkansas at 151? I'll take Mississippi State at 110-1.
All right, so anyway, there's that. So that's what may happen on the field this fall. How about during the spring where coaches get to sort of relax and sort of, ease their minds a little bit, focus on a little golf? That's the subject of item number 10 here today on our SEC Country Life First and 10 list. One of the great charity events that goes on during this time of year, each and every year, not too far from when we do the show every day, over in Greensboro, Georgia at Lake Oconee, is the Chick-fil-A Charity Challenge. Chick-fil-A, of course, is a great partner for college sports, and they do a big charity event at Lake Oconee every year, sort of a 2-day event involving coaches in golf, and I guess yesterday they had the closest to the pin event, and I guess congratulations go out to Gus Malzahn, who won this event, beating the likes of Georgia Tech's Paul Johnson. You see Malzahn there getting the swing. That looks to be Dave Doran there. That's Malzahn with another swing. Maybe not exactly
he's getting the hips
Johnson.
Into it, isn't he?
Kind of getting the hips there. You see Malzahn with the win. Now, I want you to also watch here for a moment. What is your boy Dan Mullen doing playing golf in flip-flops?
That's the same thing I thought. Like this guy left his shoes in the car, left his shoes back in Gainesville.
Boy, he looks like a Gator doing that. All he needs is his I mean, come on, you can't be on the. This is a Ritz-Carlton golf course. You can't.
Who was
be
that just hit right there?
I don't know who that was.
That was tough. That was a rough one right there.
You see Dabo there. You can't be out there in flip-flops. That's, by the way,
Fedora,
that's
right?
Larry Fedora, who's in great shape. Fedora is in great shape now.
Well, that's a slick swing right there.
You can't be out there in flip-flops, can you?
No, it's tough. I would love to hear the story. Oh, that's Pitt's coach right there in that vest. Well, that was an ugly swing.
I have a hot take on this.
Gotcha.
You don't want your coach to be good at golf. It's okay if you play golf. Nick Saban's a player. Most of these coaches play golf. You don't want your coach.
What does your score have to be qualified as good for golf? Like below 80? You have to be shooting below 80.
If you're like a 9 or 10 handicap,
I don't
that's
know if I want that.
You're not recruiting.
I don't know if I want that.
You're not recruiting hard enough.
I don't know
if you're going out there and shooting an 81, you're not recruiting hard enough.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that one. If you're shooting an 81 or something under that, you're probably too good for me.
All right, each and every day on the show, we're always looking to close things out the same way. We're always looking for champions of life, and today, this is a personal favorite for me. Y'all know that I'm a fan of professional wrestling, and recently the WWE traveled all the way to Saudi Arabia for reasons unbeknownst to me. But for one wrestler, Titus O'Neil, who goes by the nickname Worldwide, it was a moment he'd never forget, and for the rest of us, sheer entertainment. Take a look at this.
This is number 39 into the Rumble. 39 men. And the leader.
All right, so O'Neil's about to come out of the back here. Now he's running down the ramp like every wrestler always does. Here's where things get very different. He trips and falls and he goes under the ring. Credit to him, he sort of jumps back out and stays in character. Folks, I know y'all know wrestling's not real, but this is not planned. This is a total botch on his part.
So is this guy in character, is he's serious? Because I feel like if it would have been somebody that's like a funny character, it would have been way easier to play this off. If you're like one of these serious wrestlers,
this is
nothing you can do there.
This guy's running down to this ring with a purpose. He's ready to beat somebody up, and then boop.
Like, you know what I'm saying? If you're Mick Foley from back in my day, and you get up and you just kind of laugh and go, what are you going to do?
A little easier for a character like that.
This guy's like, I got to get in the ring.
I don't think Titus O'Neil's able to play that off as well, but credit to him, he has turned it into his very own line of T-shirts here now. So he says, rumble, stumble, or slide, do it worldwide. So making the best of a bad situation, give him credit for that,
I
right?
absolutely love it, man. That's a hilarious video right there.
Yeah, really good stuff. Hey, thanks for being with us here today on SEC Country Live. Check out our podcast. It'll be up for you if you want to listen to the audio version of the show. Also, we're back here in really about an hour and a half for live coverage of the Grayson 4 as they make their announcement. Auburn, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. SEC schools in the mix. We'll cover it for you right here on these SEC Country video channels. And then back again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live.